Hi everybody, Kerry from KC Creations. I've had a few of the ladies that come to my group are now proud owners of the BigShot, so I thought it was a good time to do some videos just about the basic techniques of how to use a BigShot. So the first one I'm going to use is, is the embossing. So the first one I'm going to do is how to use an embossing folder. The platform on the BigShot does give you some information about whether to have it open or closed, but a lot of the things on the BigShot platform are now out of date, so it's a bit confusing. So first of all, just remember that for embossing folders, you have it open at tab 1 because they're fairly thick, so you don't want it closed. Okay, so this is one of the embossing folders. And what we do is just put the cardstock in there. Try and get into the habit of putting it in with the logo facing up. It's not so relevant for this if you're just doing it dry, but if you are inking it up, it really does matter which side you actually put the folder up on, according to what side of the cardstock you want to be embossed with the ink. So yeah, put that with that facing up. You put your first acrylic plate down, pop down your embossing folder, and you put your second one down. Now the idea is to hold it here until, and start to crank the wheel, until you see it's going by itself. At that point, once it's grabbed it, hold it here, because as you can see, it will move around if you don't hold it secure. Okay, so the first thing, just to do a dry embossing with an embossing folder. You can see the details, just lovely. Now, a few different things you can do with the dry embossing folder. If you've used just the embossing folder dry, is you can either do it as a contrast colour, you can use the same colour as the cardstock just to give it a little bit more definition, or you can use the same sort of tonings but just a little bit darker. I'm just using my trusty brayer. Okay, now I like to do it on the back side of the card. That way. Doesn't really matter how you run it, it all sort of tends to turn out pretty good anyway. Okay, so you've now turned a card that's just been dry embossed into a little bit more of a different pattern where the little flowers, this is on Petals of Plenty, I think, now sort of really pop. If you did it on the side that was actually embossed, depending on the design, if it's a fairly even design, you can actually very carefully run the brayer over like that, and it will just pick up the raised bits. This looks particularly good if you use a white craft ink, but it really only works if you've got an embossing folder that has got a very even design. Otherwise you'll end up going on the areas that are flat in between. It spoils it. Okay, so that's actually inking up with the brayer the right side that's been embossed. Okay, the third way you can add ink to an embossed image is to actually ink up the embossing folder before you run it through the BigShot. And like I said before, this is where it's important which side you know that you're going to put facing up. Okay, so this is the front of the embossing folder because it's got the logos. So that's the side, the back of that side is the side we're going to ink up. Okay, so you just run your ink through like this with the brayer. Just get it fairly even. And then you put your cardstock in. Remember, this will be the front of the design, facing up. Okay, and then we run it through again with it open at tab 1. Acrylic plate, the embossing folder with the cardstock, and the second acrylic plate. Push it through until it starts to grab, hold it and continue to push it through. Some people say to actually go back and forwards a few times to really try and push that ink into the card. Okay, I don't know if it's necessary or not, but I guess it doesn't hurt. Okay, so let's have a look at that one. And you can see the result there, which is another look again. So it's actually got the ink now behind the flower on the flatter parts of the design. So looking at it together, that's when you actually emboss it first and then ink up the reverse side using a brayer. That's emboss it first and then very carefully ink up the design on the right side, on the embossed side, using the brayer. And that's actually putting the ink on the embossing folder before running it through the BigShot. Okay, so very different looks, all from the same embossing folder. Okay, well, I hope you give that a try, and hopefully I'll be back with another video on another technique with the BigShot very soon. Thanks.